But delighted today to be joined by a panel that I think will give us insight from a couple of different sporting worlds with different perspectives coming from amateur, professional, individual. So look, we'll take a quick run through. I know no introductions required as such, but Keith Wood, former Munster and Ireland captain and Lions player, I imagine to get to those levels, leadership is something you find out about early in life.
It absolutely is, and it's getting the view from other people around you, and actually the people that you tend to work with tend to be the leaders that you learn the most off. And I think in an awful lot of cases leadership is viewed as this sort of unusual construct when it's actually what happens every single day. And so the good leaders that you come across are the ones that live by what they're actually talking about. It's do what I say and do what I do. It's not do what I say, not what I do. And you can notice how that actually has a huge influence on other people. And you know, all the talks go about values and ethos and everything that happens within it. It tends to go from an attitude that works from within an office or within a station or within an organisation, is that actually what you're doing is what you believe is right, and everybody tries to do it. And that's the goal, that's what everybody's going for, but that's one of the key elements.
Absolutely. Jenny Murphy, you're one of these enviable talents that has played Gaelic games, soccer, boxing, but we know you, I suppose, on the highest platform with the Munster or the Ireland rugby team. But I have to address you're sidelined at the moment anyway.
Yeah, did a bit of a number on the knee last week, so ACL and medial is gone for the moment. So yeah, I'll be out for a couple of months, but these things happen, contact sport and all that. Absolutely,
but you come into, I suppose, the Ireland setup with the leadership I'd imagine you took from the different sports you played throughout life, and like Keith says, it's a best practice mindset.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have played a number of sports at a decent level, and you come in contact with all different types of leaders. I don't think there's this one set kind of leadership structure that works. I think you'll have across the board. It doesn't work if you got one leader on the team. Everyone is a leader in a different way, and you kind of mold to the team and the culture. So I've been lucky enough to have learned from some of the greats and played under some fantastic captains. And it's not just the captains, I think, that set the bar. And it's reiterating what Keith said. It's a leader is someone that no matter what time of the day or what kind of mood that they're in, it's constant. They're very constant. You know what you're going to get all the time, and it's in actions they're going to do exactly what they say they do, and then you just follow or help lead in that direction, I guess.
Derek McGrath, as a former Waterford player, now entering you're in your 5th season as Waterford manager. Was the progression to management something that happened naturally for you?
Yeah, it probably happened on the back of not really having a sustained career like the 3 people that I have here. I only really played about 3 championship matches with Waterford, so even though you might find it hard to believe, I was actually a bit of a teenage prodigy for, I played 4 years, minor 4 years. So I think it was more based on not failing as a player, but certainly not being as successful as other players and kind of delving into another form of not expertise but coaching or teaching. I'm a teacher there the last 18 or 19 years, so I think there's a big correlation there between the coaching and teaching, leading, managing, if you like. And anecdotally, I remember just going for the Waterford job. You have to plan like two years, kind of always having a bit of guile, a bit of cuteness about me, looking at the job coming and planning for about 2 years. One of our players, Noel Connors, was doing a thesis on leadership in the GAA, and he asked me to proofread his thesis, and not only did I proofread it, but I plagiarised it as well, to be honest with you, for the interview process. But it just came across all the different styles of leadership, and that's to follow up on Jenny's point. I think, everyone here has probably done an MA in management or in business or in leadership, and they come across Goldman's leadership styles from affiliative to coercive and authoritative and all that. And I think that's what it is. Like, you have to deal with certain people in a coercive manner, other people in a completely hand around the shoulder kind of manner, and other guys you'll have to be kind of a little bit more visionary. And I think combining all those things is difficult as a leader. But I think it's very hard to define any talks in leaders. Very hard to define what a leader actually is. I think if you think you're one in the first place, you might be in bother. I think it's ensuring that you have enough positive paranoia as well about yourself to kind of be able to kind of keep sharp.
Ken Doherty, you are Ireland's most successful snooker player, and I think you bring an interesting insight to this panel because sometimes leadership is, associated with teams. You come from an individual sport where success has to be driven perhaps by your own leadership.
Yeah, I am Ireland's most successful snooker player, but we only did have maybe 4 or 5 professionals. So it wasn't that difficult, was it? I never had to worry about injuries like medial ligament damage, My only injury I've got as a professional is probably a sore arse from sitting in the chair watching Ronnie O'Sullivan batter the hell out of me. But I used to beat Ronnie O'Sullivan up quite regularly because we used to be practice partners when I lived in England. I lived in Ilford. Now, he was only 12 years old at the time, you know what I mean? So, but still, it still counts. It still counts. No, I mean, the fact that, we talk about leaderships and teams and stuff like that, I play an individual sport. So I have to sort of be my own leader, and concentrate on, my own sort of, practice and sacrifices and stuff like that. Which is good in a way, because you're only sort of concerned about yourself and getting yourself ready. But you do sort of, from playing team sports, like as a kid and still trying to play football now, which is quite difficult, you do miss the camaraderie of a team, But, working, we have a little team in Sunshine Radio on our sports show, and that's fantastic, And I do love the sort of the team aspect, but I also enjoy, the times of being a snooker professional and still a snooker professional, I've sort of been able to, captain your own ship as well. You have to have certain qualities to do that. I once, bumped in, as a Manchester United fan, I used to go to the Manchester United games, and one of the players who was captain of Manchester United at the time said, who loved snooker, and he said, I wish I had played an individual sport, And I said, how could you say that? Like, you've been so successful, you won Premier Leagues and cups and that. He said, yeah, but he said, I don't have to rely on my teammates, I said, I only have to worry about myself. Probably like Keith Wood, he wouldn't have to rely on Keith Wood, because he'd be a right lazy bastard quite often, So that was the point he was getting at. So it was a different perspective. I couldn't believe that. But I could understand it in a little way, and I suppose Keith Wood could probably understand that as well,
Well, I'd love the opportunity to give him his first snooker injury. It wouldn't bother me in the slightest either, but I'd find a home for that. But it's funny, and I would always say it, especially when you talk in front of a business audience or even a radio audience, and I've been involved in radio for 21 years with the BBC and for 10 years with Communicore and Spin Southwest. So, you're trying to always say, what do we have that we can correlate to go over? Well, there's nothing magic about it. There's nothing in any way, shape or form. I think an awful lot of it is experiential. It's the conversations you actually have. So I would always say, when you meet a sportsman or businessman or whoever it is that you meet, if they have a level of excellence, you want a taste of that. You want to see what that's actually like. I first met Ken, it's perfectly around the idea of leaders, in 10 Downing Street in 1997, which ironically was for Tony Blair to meet the leaders in British sport. And the two of us Aegis are there in the corner, and just to show their level of leadership in 10 Downing Street at the time, there was loads of people. It was fantastic. It was kind of every person you met was just name-dropping paradise. It was absolutely, except Ken, of course. Yeah. And,
I was serving the drinks.
And you were bloody good at it too. But they left us. We were standing behind it. So the whole place emptied, and they left 3 Irishmen in the corner giggling, and we had to find our own way out of 10 Downing Street. So their leadership was lacking. They didn't quite understand that you couldn't leave 3 mad,
they lost the next election, didn't they?
Yeah. And but it was. I remember that day was important for me, because you suddenly got the chance to deal with Olympic champions or FA Cup winners or Premier League winners or different World Cup winners. It was just amazing to try and see, and it isn't a conversation who you're playing next Saturday. It's amazing. Sportsmen get immediately to the nub of it and say, well, what works? How do you do that? It only takes 30 seconds before that starts. And that's one thing I would say in terms of leadership is, you have to be open to actually spread whatever you have that you think is of value, and they may get one piece from it. May not agree with all of it, they don't have to.
And Jenny, you might want to spread your expertise, but equally engaging with other people around you. Like, where would you say your influences came in terms of leadership?
A whole host of different people. I think my parents would be first and foremost. In terms of, like, even when I was younger, I got dragged to all number of sports. I grew up in rural Kildare, so there wasn't like girls' Gaelic football team, so I had to join the boys and the soccer team as well. And it was a case of, like, my dad had to bribe me with a 99 to go, because they wouldn't pass to me for the first 2 training sessions. And the rule was you have to go 3 times to a training session, and then you can make a decision then if you don't like it or not. And it kind of bribed me with that, and, like, I think I creased some poor lad in the second training session, forgot all about the 99s, kept going, and it was that kind of thing. Now, he tried with Irish dancing, and that didn't work quite as well. But yeah, it was that kind of, like, I think Dad would have been a big one. And you'd never win, you'd have to earn a win. So if you're, like, even playing football out in the lawn and, you know, you'd nutmeg Dad, it was a proper nutmeg. He earned it. Like, he'd be absolutely raging, and that way you'd savor the moment. So he wouldn't let you win. You have to win it yourself. So he would be a massive influence. And then your teammates as well, as you kind of, and you rely on them an awful lot more. They become kind of a pseudo family, especially during Six Nations and World Cup time, because the turnaround for a women's game in a World Cup is 4 days. So you don't have time to kind of go out and kind of get a bit of a breather or get out of that bubble. So when you're having a crap day or an off day, they know, like, straight away when you walk in the door, Jenny's going to have a mare or whatever, and you kind of lean on each other. So it's kind of adapting to the situation. And
I think that was one of the values when you beat New Zealand that time, the All Blacks. It was about how there was so many leaders on that field, and you were just one. You were one, you know.
Well, yeah, but I think you have to, and I think the leaders were there before that. You have to build a culture before performance doesn't come before culture, and we had that in spades in a year or two prior to that. I was extremely lucky when I came into the squad that I came in at the right time. I hadn't a clue that I was playing with so many special individuals, and they were so willing to share all this information. Like, the first camp that I came into, I was rooming with a girl called Grace David, and we're going for the same position, and she stayed an extra half an hour after training session to make sure that I knew the runs and the moves and the lines and what we were doing in certain positions and all this tactical extra stuff that she didn't have to do. And then you go back to the room, and instead of maybe going and hanging out with the older senior players that were her friends, she stayed in and would give me homework to do and kind of correct it and help me out that way. And I kind of said, like, Grace, well, why are you helping me out so much? Like, I really appreciate it. And she just said, if I make you better and you're better for the team and they choose you over me, team comes first. And that's what I'll do. That's my part that I will play in winning a match. I mightn't be on the pitch, but I'm going to help us win by making you better. And it's just that under the wing self-sacrifice, and it's that kind of culture that spreads. So when I got a bit older, when younger players come into the squad, you remember Grace David and what she's done, and you want to pass that on. And it wasn't just Grace; it was everybody else was willing to do that as well, because team comes first, not the individual.
Absolutely, that's really impressive. And Derek, you spoke a few minutes ago about your own disappointments fueling, you know, what you wanted to achieve as manager and leading, and learn the learnings from that in your leadership style.
Yeah, I think that's we're learning. I think we've all just espoused the fact that we're kind of learning all the time. I think that's the key thing, where you come from, where, you know, your roots, I suppose, and where you're growing up, and all that kind of probably shape your vision on life. I reflected on being positively paranoid at times. You know, I remember leaving. Like, I grew up in a very working class area in Waterford, we'd say, and that's enough self-depreciation for now, or pity or anything like that. But I did, and I think it shapes your outlook in terms of your opinion on leadership or anything. I remember going to De La Salle. I was the only guy that went to De La Salle from my parish, if you like. And I left there in '94, and Brother Stephen was principal there. And he wrote down on my reference that I was intellectually curious. And when I go home for the dinner and mother said to me, that means you're paranoid, Derek. You're always asking, what do you mean by that, or what's the extent of that? And I think that's what Keith alluded to in terms of questioning. How does it work? Why does it work? What happens? And I think the key thing then is balance. You know, I've taught English now in De La Salle for the last 15 years. There's a great poem by Robert Frost, Mending Wall, it's called. It's basically about an old traditionalist that comes every year to one side of the wall and he's fixing the boulders, like in Connemara, I suppose. And the other guy is coming to the other side of the wall and he's, what they say in Waterford, they say he's hopping the balls. He's kind of saying, why do we need walls? And the other fella saying, we need walls because we need to keep the barriers between us. So I think in leadership for me, it's that balance between the traditional principles that we all espouse: honesty, being authentic, being yourself, being sincere, and the whole strive for innovation, change, you know, what works, allowing a bit of creative flair in your business, in your workplace, and how you marry the two of those. I think that's the key thing that we're all striving to get towards, but we'll never get there. There's no point in saying you'll never get there, because you won't, because if you think you've arrived at that particular juncture, you know, I think you're in trouble. You know, that's from my point of view, and that'll be just a personal opinion. You know, I don't think you can ever say you've got there. Like, of course, Ken is a world champion, Keith is and Jenny has had a massive career. But yet they're hungry the whole time. You can see it in how they're talking. You know.
Yeah. Ken, I'd say you can identify with an awful lot of that about, you know, if you think you've reached the summit, you're falling off it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very fine line. And you keep, but the great thing is that you have to keep striving to make yourself better. Because even if you are a world champion, you know, there's another world championship to win. There's another UK championship, whatever, you know, and that's what the great champions do. You know, you see the likes of Ronnie O'Sullivan even now, who's probably the most talented player that's ever played. You know, he's still playing. He wants to get to Stephen Hendry's like 7 world championship. He's driven, and Stephen Hendry was driven. But if you thought you were going to get any inspiration or any advice from them, you had another thing coming. They wouldn't give you a cent, like, you know. But you could learn from them by watching them. And watching what they had to do, or you know, the way they managed themselves, the way they managed their time, the way they practiced, you know, their tunnel vision of striving for success, even though no matter how great they were. And Steve Davis was like that back in the 80s as well. So you can learn an awful lot from your teammates, from your team leaders, but from your opposition as well. And I think that's one thing that I've learned over the years, and particularly now when you're doing the BBC work. I used to watch a lot of snooker as a kid, and my first inspiration would have been Alex Higgins, which wouldn't have been an ideal inspiration the way he lived his life, but certainly the way he played, and the fact that, you know, Alex Higgins once got an injury, actually. He had a broken ankle because he jumped out of his first floor apartment because his girlfriend had locked him in because he'd been drinking too much, you know, and he turned up at the next snooker tournament with a broken ankle and still won the tournament, by the way, you know. That was Alex Higgins. But yeah, he was like my inspiration. But now doing the BBC work, watching the guys, how they perform, you learn an awful lot more, and that's what I didn't do when I was playing, which I probably should have done more. And that's what I would like to encourage a lot of the young snooker players, is to watch what the greats do, how they go about it, and you can learn so much from that.
I find it's very interesting. So when I retired, I'd already worked for the BBC, which was kind of nice, and when I was injured, I was getting an opportunity to see what broadcasting was like, both on radio and telly, and it's just a different perspectives, and it's a different way to do it. I actually felt it made the last couple of years of my career better, because I was now spending more time not thinking about me, but analysing what other people were actually doing, and also trying not to care too much about it, because when you're trying to do your own thing, your world just kind of pulls in on top of you. This is my job, this is what I'm doing, I have to do this really well, it has to be, you know, perfect. It's rarely perfect, and sports teaches you a lot that you're going to lose. You know, you're going to probably lose more than you win, and you have to be able to deal with that a lot. And for me, that sense of punditry and analysis means that you end up looking at slightly bigger themes. You see things in a slightly wider lens. And it's funny, you mentioned a phrase, was it paranoid, positive paranoia? What I would always try and use was aggressive positivity. I would be fighting like mad to be positive, because I think that has a good influence after you. You know that if you sit in a room with people who are bloody miserable, sack of spuds, that it just takes away from you. Yeah. And actually, you just don't want that. The news is bad enough all the time. There's a lot of kind of rubbish that's there all the time that is negative out there. Why would you want to kind of perpetuate that in a day-to-day basis? And why would you want to perpetuate that in a working context or a team context? So I'm not saying you have to lie and say everything is great and lovely and rosy in the world, but fight to be positive about it. Yes, you can look at it in a slightly different fashion. You have to be realistic. But I ended up with an Indian taxi driver this morning. He was awesome. I mean, he was absolutely awesome. I'm not a religious man, but he was sitting inside reading. He was reading the Bible. He was an Indian Catholic. And I said, God, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I was trying to get into the seat. And he said, no, I just found a little moment in time. He said, I like this. And he just explained why. He said, it was a bit tough this morning, and now I'm sitting down, and this is just lovely. I said, how cool is this guy? I mean, I wrote him a note and sent him an email inside afterwards. He was just awesome. But I actually walked in here with a big smile on my face because of a random Indian taxi driver who just said, I asked him, are there many Indian taxi drivers named Joseph in Dublin? He said, I think I'm unique. And it was just I was happy coming in the door. I'm still happy, mind you, by the way. But it was, and I do think that positivity element is something that we kind of sidestep at times, exactly. And we shouldn't really.
And it certainly helps your performance as well. There's no doubt about that. They always say, if you're happy in yourself, you're happy at home, your performance is going to, greatly increase. I think that's very, very important.
And I'd 100% agree with that. When when you're happier on the pitch and you're happier stepping into your place of work, and that's what I would consider when I'm going on the field. I'm at work and I do my job. But when I walk on and I'm happier, I play better. Like, it's easy, and it's the same going into work in the morning as well. It's like if I'm in a good mood, and it's the easiest thing. It can be someone smiling and letting you out in the middle of traffic, and it's all these little things that can kind of spread, and you're just in a good mood.
And radio, in a way, like sport, is a creative environment. So you have to be, Derek, flourishing, I suppose, in every way in order to bring your best.
Yeah, I find it harder to be happier now. I'll be straight up.
You're paranoid, for God's sake.
I'm just being authentic, as we said a few minutes ago. just based on, we talk a lot about positivity. Keith is right. But say, for instance, we're on the bounce of 3 defeats in the league so far. We were in the All-Ireland final last year. We were pucking the ball away from winning the All-Ireland final. We're going poorly this year. Something that I probably would have envisaged myself during the winter periods. But, there's no big deal in that. We're trying to stick to the plan, as someone said. That's the way we get away with it in these kind of things, stick to the plan. But inside, sometimes I do churn. Like, I do curl in terms of when is it going to turn. I seek solace then in terms of the group around you, knowing that there's no kind of nobody disenfranchised or nobody kind of, feeling, ostracized or with us completely. So that's how I seek my solace. And also basically on the obsessive nature of doing the job in a complete 100% manner gives you a certain kind of, and surrounding yourself with good people, etc. All the things that are said. But sometimes I find it more difficult to be positive and not relating the positivity always to kind of winning. I have to be completely honest. Sometimes, I'm definitely more positive on a Sunday evening after a league match at home when we win, as opposed to when we lose. I might as well be completely honest with it. There's no point in dressing it up. So I do go through a process where you not grieve, but you kind of feel it, like,
I'd say you're a bag of laughs. Away from home when you've lost. Yeah.
No, but it's look, that's the nature, particularly at local level. I think, in terms of, I think most of what you've done has been at international level. So obviously that could never occur at a hurling sense. But at local level, there's that element of parochialism in it. And there's the element of you're living it there whilst you're at home, and that's natural. That goes with it. That's like the whole, and you're kind of trying to get the balance. I heard the previous discussion where the chap there, I think he had a northern accent, spoke about caring and consideration that has to, I think sometimes the populist opinion can be linked to not ignorance, but can be linked to the easy train of thought to go with. And sometimes we have to stand alone as so-called leaders of something. If you believe something and you're doing it with integrity, that's where I take my solace from. I'm not coming. If I'm coming across as the most pessimistic man alive, I don't mean that. What I mean is there has to be a sense of realism to what you live. I'm sure it's the same in business, in radio. Figures are down, viewership is down, listenership is down. What do we do? What do we need to change? What do we need to keep? What do we need to tweak? What do we have to kind of do about it? Do we need to make dramatic changes? And that's what leadership is about, really. That's what it ultimately comes back to. But yeah, I try hard to be positive at times. Try hard.
I think there's a great honesty in that leadership, and you know that image from last year's All Ireland final, Derek, I hope you don't mind me saying, of yourself and Dan on the pitch as Galway were, you know, the emotion you showed in that image, I think showed a real honest leadership as well, that you shared in the disappointment of your players, your supporters and everyone, you know.
Yeah, but I think it's, looking back on that now, it's learning. The lads mightn't have to learn, but I certainly have to learn. I don't look back at that only from a physical point of view, cringeworthy, but I look back and you say, what message does it send out? You look at someone like Jim Gavin, wins the All Ireland, and he's completely focused. So I think it's, I'm not saying I wasn't focused, but it's learning to be not less emotive and going towards that phase of being calculated and knowing that everything is being done as well. You know, I think there's, you know, you often see dressing rooms, for instance, the documentaries with Keith in the lines where the guys are talking, and Jim Telfer and those, and they're kind of, that's really emotive. So getting the balance between emotion and a calculated performance in business and sport is what we're all trying to achieve, really. And Keith might know certainly more about that.
Yeah, well, I would say in terms of that, I love this conversation. You're kind of only part of this. But really, like, you are being true to yourself, which is pretty cool. And so you look back and you say you cringe in it. I'd say get over yourself on that one.
No, I cringe because I'm about 3 stone away. That's what.
Well, you can do something about that very promptly. But that idea of that's what it was, and that's the moment in time. This is the reality at the moment in time, and you react that way. I mean, I'm saying being positive. I'm not. Like, I am that miserable guy on the Sunday night when you lose. Of course I am. I want to win. I want to win all the time. I want to win at everything all the time. You have to find your sense of balance, but you also have to be, you don't have to be Jim Galvin. You're unique in that instance. And one thing we would say for 100% certainty when you talk about leadership is everybody is a different way.
Yeah, of course.
Jim Telfer, I can tell you, Jim Telfer is one of the most accurate guys in what he would say to you. He would have thought about that for a week. This wasn't kind of
off the cuff.
Here's something. He would have. He actually told me afterwards. He used to rehearse it in front of the mirror for the whole week, and he didn't get a word wrong. And we would have done anything for him. Yeah. Now, he pushed us to the hardest level every single week, and we said it afterwards. If we had him for an extra training session, we'd have killed him, because he was just so. You couldn't last in that level of emotive for any further length of time. But we really appreciated for that period of time. And I see him now, and he's. I know we've shared something together. It's pretty awesome, actually. That's 21 years ago. But being honest to yourself and leadership is like it's kind of mad for a few sports people to sit up and talk about leadership, and we're all selfish sportsmen because you have to be selfish. But leadership is kind of what you decide you want to make of it yourself.
Yeah. And motivation within leadership then, we'll say, Ken, particularly in your, like, it's a profoundly intense game, and to maintain the motivation within a match itself and within a career when it's all coming from yourself. But talk us through your motivation, your
well, your motivation is, as Keith says, like, we're all winners, you know, and you always want to win, and that's the motivation, is to sort of, you know, to try and lift that trophy on a Sunday night, you know. I mean, I was a terrible loser. I mean, if I lost a match, you know, a particular match on TV, you know, I'd lock myself away in the room for a couple of days. Even the dog was scared to come into the room, you know, in case you get a kick. And that's the way you have to be. And no matter what sport you play, and that's the affinity we have with all sports, and indeed in leadership as well. You want to try and be the best, and try and keep the motivation. The motivation is hard as you get that older. It's hard to motivate because other priorities come into your life, family and children and stuff. But you have to keep striving, keep going, and it does get tougher. But you have to believe. I think the most important thing is the belief. And the confidence, and to put the work in as well. That's the hard part as you get a bit older. But the motivation, you never lose the instinct, I think, of competition, of competing and striving to, to win. I think you never lose that sort of, I don't think any of us ever will, no matter what we do. And that's the same, whether you move from your sport and you carry on, like Keith's gone into business and stuff like that. As I said, we have our radio sports show, and we want to try and make that the best that we can be, And you talked about, being miserable. We always start on our sports show. We always start off in the papers, and we always try and pick a little funny story or have a little chat amongst ourselves, myself and Reggie or Paul, and we always try and start with a little funny story from the papers, because that sort of, it kicks the morning in. People are listening to us 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning. It grabs them a little bit and it kicks them in, even though the sports stories. But we always try and do that, to have a little bit of a laugh, try and lift the mood, and then crack on with the day's sport.
Jenny, as regards, you're obviously sidelined at the moment through injury, but you had taken a break from the international scene, and you have spoken openly about the fact that you wanted to, I suppose, reignite your motivation and didn't feel your place in the squad in your frame of mind at that time was where it should be.
Yeah, I've been playing on the international squad now since 2012 and loved every minute of it, ups and downs, and had some great victories and some hammerings, so it's been equal. But after the World Cup, tough time, didn't perform, and felt that I wouldn't be able to give the jersey 100%, and you shouldn't be wearing the jersey if you're not able to do that. I would have been taking up a place that some other girl would have killed to be in, and that didn't feel right. I've had other priorities. I kind of needed to kind of get a career in order as well. We're still 100% amateur, so you have to kind of work around that, but you're training pretty much full time. It's twice a day during the week, so it's 6 a.m. gym, then you go to work, and then you go back to the pitch, car nap, another fitness session, and then you do it all over again. And it's great. It's not a sacrifice or anything like that. You get to play for your country, and it's the best thing in the world. If I could get everyone in this room to do it, I would highly recommend it. It is the best thing, one of the best things that I've ever done, but you need to give it 100% because it takes so many other aspects of your life away. You can't, social life, family life, any inkling of a boyfriend, whatever, it's out the window because this is your main priority. And it wasn't quite there after the World Cup, so I had to kind of come up for air, I guess. Felt that I could get my body in good order, was continuing playing club, and then this happened. So it was like, nice laid plans gone out the window, but
it's an enforced break now, so you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, it's grand. It's grand, and black's a very slimming colour, so.
I was going to ask you about being positive, because you've come in here, I won't say you've bounced in, because you were quite miserable on those crutches that I threw down. That's 9 months. Like it's a really, just for those, it's a cruciate injury, it's a horrible injury, really. It's painful and hard and tough. And yet you did come in. Are you positive, or are you faking it?
A bit of both. Like when it did happen, I kind of knew straight away what it was. Like the physio wasn't looking me in the eye and was obviously very upset. Would still get the watery eyes, but this is a sport that we play, and 9 months out, yeah, it's a long time, but I've had a worse injury. I was out for 16 months. I had a double back fracture and facets gone. Was told possibly mightn't ever play again. And when the rug is pulled out and you have no say in how you end in doing something that you love, it's not a position that I'd like anybody to be in. Managed to get back from that and get playing the Six Nations last year. So I'm playing on bonus time. Anything after that back injury is just extra, and I'm just grateful for it. So this is a setback, it's a big one, but I'm aiming to be back next year anyway, that's the plan. So what else can you do if you're not?
It's pretty awesome though.
Yeah, it looks good.
Derek, I wanted to ask you about motivation in the sense that you've brought the Waterford hurlers on a serious journey at this stage, and you continue to chase the Holy Grail. But within all that, you've developed a game plan that has drawn a lot of criticism at the start, and motivating yourself to stick with that system and continue to bring your team through it.
Hope you have a couple of hours then for this. Yeah, look, I think you have to be, the principles of any game plan, if you like, have to be run parallel with where you're from, who you represent, instinctive, passion and all that kind of stuff. But I think if people think that in the modern hurling game, I know rugby is very, very structured now, and the lads know more about it than me, but that you can say to a guy, a set of inter-county players, there's the field, out you go, lads, play. There's no matchups today. You're not picking up Keith Wood. You're not picking up Jenny. Blah blah blah. So I think what's difficult for us is the amount of analysis, I suppose, and scrutiny on the way we play. Nobody has equated our journey with the system allowing the lads to flourish. I think the easier angle is to equate the journey with not allowing the lads to flourish, which is, it's a debate that for the outside world, it doesn't really concern us, but sometimes it can permeate its way through to the group, and I think that's, I was asked to give a talk to the Rotary Club in Waterford there about 2 or 3 years ago, so I said, geez, I better read something on the Rotary Club before I do it, not to be completely hypocritical. So I read Paul Harris's book, and I came across a great quote in it, and it said, in the battle between intelligence and ignorance is normally the aggressor. So I thought it was a great quote. Now, I'm not saying I'm intelligent or anything like that, but I changed it from intelligent to truth. Sometimes the truth is not always out there, and I think so. I think we've got to stick to it. We've tweaked it along the way, but if I was to go back on every conversation from every analyst and say, well, that actually didn't happen, I think, you look at all the masters of it. You look at Schmidt this morning, it has a go at Gatland in terms of, what the perceived weaknesses in Ireland's backline are, in terms of not getting, scoring tries. He had a bite this morning. I think the one thing I'm going to try to do is not write it out, but certainly not bite if I can help it now. He's obviously engaging in the psychological. You see Eddie Jones is the same. You look at all these guys, when you need to bite, when you don't need to bite. You look at Martin O'Neill with Tony O'Donoghue, the whole spat there, you learn from all that. Then you just say you're better off maybe being yourself. Keep going down the line of, look, we're doing our best, even though inside you might be kind of saying, feck you now, what I mean? I know better, but I'm not about to say it. So I think that's the key thing for me. We stick to it. And plus, we're a consultative group as well, the lads. It's not the players don't lead it, but we do have leadership groups within where you drive these things in terms of what might needs to be done, and they're always looking around the corners in terms of what has to be done. So, yeah, look, we'll just try. We'll keep going at that. We'll do our own thing, and once our group are happy with what we're doing, and we're trying our best, that's okay with me.
Innovation. Very finally, before we offer an opportunity for people to ask questions from the floor, Keith, from your sporting perspective, your insight into the radio world, what's your advice to the leaders in the room who are looking to continue to inspire their staff?
You have to love it. And actually, one of the things about radio is such a fantastic medium. It draws an awful lot of people in because people like storytelling. They like the spoken word. They like that interaction. It's a very easy way to interact with the world because you can do other things and you can still hear it kind of washes over you. So, but there's nobody here that hasn't turned up that doesn't love what they do in the job. You have to kind of love this sort of job. One of the elements that wasn't touched on, maybe it was a little bit about being yourself and that, but so you have to be very self-aware and you have to kind of understand that where you are and how you fit into the other element. I used to use the phrase in the team that you needed to be very selfish in a team context, which meant you had to do your job incredibly well, but it had to fit into the team. There was no point you being the best player in the field if the team lost because you were doing something that was too selfish and it wasn't in the team context. But you still need to be responsible for your own performance and you need to try and achieve in your own performance or hit a standard. You can't hit that standard every day. You can't hit 100% all the time. If you do, you burn out, and that's what happens. But I do think you need to be self-aware of the people that are in your team, to know what their strengths and weaknesses are, to know what makes them tick, to understand them a little bit more. You don't have to be the best of friends with them, but you actually want to enjoy your working environment. And the better you understand the people that work with you, the easier that actually is. And as a leader, it makes it an awful lot easier because when someone says, I can't do that for whatever, well, you know why. you can be more understanding of it. Like, you can't have a sort of two blocks against each other all the time if you disagree. So for me, know your team and love what you do.
Brilliant. So any questions from the floor? Just one here.
Keith, can I ask you?
Just 1 second, we'll get the microphone there. Thank you.
Keith, like, the microphone.
You were louder without it. But,
Can I ask you, who was the third Irish person in Downing Street? And then Ken, was it the captain of Manchester United?
Well, Keith will answer the first part.
it wasn't. There was a little paravan, screen in the room. And I didn't know Ken before that. And the third person was Eddie Jordan, who wouldn't be silent in any room anyway, right, to be honest. But we ended up wanting to meet everybody in the room and being kind of a little bit shy about it too, which is kind of an interesting idea. And just, oh God, look, there it is. Oh, look, there's Steve Redgrave. Oh, there's Alec Ferguson. Oh my God. But the three Egypts were on the other side of the screen, giggling, talking. It was actually there was nobody outside, and we started chatting. And it maybe goes back to some of the previous. We were telling stories. It was storytelling. This is our way to interact. This was our way to interact in terms of his focus, or Eddie's drive, or me coming back from a tour, whatever it was, and the experience that were in it. We just got kind of obsessed with myself. Yes, it was supposed to be this big thing for the British government. That was just gone within 2 minutes of us meeting each other. We just were happy enough in our own company. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was funny, because we just started telling stories and telling jokes amongst ourselves. And I think Bernie Ecclestone joined in because he was there with Eddie Jordan. And he was telling as many sort of Irish jokes as we were telling him stories about English jokes and Scottish jokes and Welsh jokes, So it was a great night's entertainment. And we were sort of picking our brains as well, because we were learning from each other about, different stories, our different paths. How the hell did three Irish fellas get here to 10 Downing Street? And it was quite nice, but it was such a great night. And I tell everybody, about our wonderful night together. It was really, you know what I mean.
I love you, Ken.
He never rode, he never ran.
On that love story, we'll leave it for there. But look, I want to thank the panel for their insight. And Keith Wood, Jenny Murphy, Derek McGrath and Ken Doherty. If you